Welcome to this new tutorial in which we're going to explore Angular state management with NgRx. In Angular applications, managing state effectively is crucial, especially as the applications grow in complexity. NgRx, or short for Angular Reactive Extensions, is a popular library for state management in Angular, built on the principle of Redux. It provides a predictable state container to manage application state in a consistent and scalable way. And GRX leverages the concepts of store, which is a single source of truth that holds the application states in an immutable object. And then we have actions that are plain objects that describe what happens in the application, such as user interactions or API responses. Reducers are pure functions that specify how the state changes in response to actions. Then we have selector that are functions used to query specific slices of state from the store, and effects, which is a middleware for handling side effects like asynchronous operation or API calls. So by using NGRX, developer can ensure predictable state transitions, simplify debugging with tools like NGRX Dev Tools, enable better scalability and maintainability of the application. So NGRX is particularly beneficial in applications with complex workflow or shared state cross components. It promotes a clean architecture by separating concerns and ensuring a reactive programming approach. To learn more about the NGRX library, you can just head over to their website, which is ngrx.io. Then from there, you click on Get Started, and you will see all the key concepts, local state management, installation, and the diagram that describe what are the different components or concepts within the NGRX library. So as you can see here, we have the selector that selects information or selects slices of the store. We have the component that trigger actions, and those actions go through the reducers to make changes on the store. And side effects or effects are to be used when we have a synchronous call to a service or to a database, let's say a provider. And these effects will be triggered by actions, and the action will also receive those information and then use the reducer to change the store, and the store will be selected using the selector, or the information within the store will be selected using the selector or queried using the selector, and that selector is actually triggered by the component to get the information to be displayed to the user. So to get started, you just need to create new Angular project and then install the NGRX library by just going to the installation, let's say, instruction. So you go here, and then it will ask you to install this. Then you have different, let's say, configuration. If you would like to use this configuration, all you have to do is just read the documentation about the installation, and that's it. So now we are going to build an Angular application using the NGRX library for state management. And to do that, we are going to just create a new project. In this project, we are going to use the latest Angular version, which is 19, and then we're going to install the NGRX library. But NGRX library is still at version 18, and to install that version, you just need to enable the peer dependency or the legacy peer dependency. I'll show you how to do that. As stated in their repository, we need to have a workaround to install version 19 or version 18 of NGRX in our Angular 19 project, because the version 19 of NGRX is still under beta, and it's not available as official or not stable yet. And the workaround is to use this flag to install NGRX 18 and make it compatible with Angular version 19, which is the case in our project. And we're going to install this library using this, let's say. So let's start installing the NGRX library into our Angular project. And to do that, we just say Angular npm and install and NGRX store and NGRX store dev tools. And then we need to supply this flag, so that makes it compatible with version 19. So let's install that. That's it. So the library is installed. We're going to start building the application. So our structure will be as follows. So we have src app Then under app, we're going to have features or components. Let's call it components. As you can see, it's a standalone, let's say, project. And then under component, we're going to create our first component. To do that, you just open it in the terminal and then say ng generate component and call it counter. So we're going to create a small counter and then see how we can leverage the NgRx library to manage the state globally. Let's create that component. The counter component will contain three different buttons and the counter, which is going to be incremented, decremented, and reset. So we will have three different buttons first. So let's try to do that. So we'll have a div, and then we're going to create an inline style. So text online is center. Then we're going to position that on top with a margin top of 50. And inside that div, we'll have three different buttons. That's it. So let's run the application to see it in action. So ng serve open. And then we're going to change the application so that we render that component first. So let's go to the app component and then remove everything from here and just render the app counter. That's it. Let's go back to the application. So we have the increment, decrement, reset. So there is no counter right now. We're going to start implementing the store and use these button actions to like make changes to the state through the reducer and then query them through the selector. So the first thing to do is we go to the counter and then start building the store there. And to do that, you just need to create a new folder here called store. And then under that folder, we have three different files. So we have the actions, so counter.actions.ts. So this will host our actions. Then we'll have another file for the reducer, so counter.reducer.ts. Then we have another file for the selectors. So we'll call it counter.selectors.ts. So this is our counter store. It has all three different components. So we are going to start implementing the actions. And to do that, we need to import the create action from the NgRx store. So that's the first thing to do. And then we're going to create the three different actions, which are the increment, decrement, and reset. So whenever the user click on increment button, there is an action that is triggered. And whenever the user click on decrement, there is another action, and so on. So to do that, we'll just define our actions that way. So here's how we define the actions. So we have three different actions, and each action will create an action that is defined with increment and decrement, then reset. And these are going to be captured by the reducer, and the changes will happen at the reducer level. So now let's go ahead and implement the reducer. And to do that, we'll just go to the reducer file and then import the create reducer from the NgRx library and the on function, which is responsible of listening to the actions that are triggered by the user. And to do that, let's start by importing let's say the create action and the on function. Then we're going to have an initial state, which is of type, let's say, integer, which contains the initial state of the counter. So let's export that initial state, const initial state. So this is the default value. Then we're going to create the reducer for the different actions. So for each action, we are going to do something to the counter state. And to do that, we have to export a reducer, which is called a counter reducer. We're going to use the create reducer function. So the first parameter of the create reducer is our initial state, which is already declared as constant, which is 0. Then we're going to listen to the different actions, like the increment, the decrement, and the reset. And based on each action, we're going to do a change on the data. So let's start with listening to the increment action. So notice that it's going to be imported from the actions that we have created. And then once we receive that action, we change the state. So state is equal to state plus 1. So we are incrementing the action. Same thing for decrement and reset. So we'll have decrement, which comes from the actions again, and this will just say state minus 1. Then we have the reset, which comes from the actions, and this will be resetting the state to 0 if you want. So it's just going to return 0, or we can reset it to initial state. As you can see here, it's just going to return 0, and we don't need to supply the state parameter in this case. So that's it for the reducer. Now we are going to go to the selector, which is responsible of selecting the state to be displayed to the user. So the first thing we need to do is to import the create feature selector and create selector from the store. So this is how we import them. Then we'll have to define the selector counter state or select counter state, which is a query. And to do that, we just say export const select counter state. And this will be responsible of getting the counter at a given time. So create feature selector, then it's of type number, so it's going to return a number, and that's actually our counter state. This is how we get the information about the counter or the counter content. Then we're going to export the select count, which is a selector to retrieve the current count value from the counter state. So we're going to use the counter state to get the current value, and to do that we just export select count, and that select count will be just the result of the create selector. So this is going to give us the selector or select counter state. So this is the state of the counter, and that's the input selector, which is our counter state. Then we have a state that is the projection of the state itself. So state will return the state. So we are going to receive the state, and then we're going to return it to the component asking for the count. So that's it for the reducer. Now we are going to use these in our component. But before doing that, we have to provide this, let's say, store at the appconfig.ts. So here we need to provide use the function to provide store to provide the NgRx store. And to do that, you just say provide store. Then we'll need to provide the counter store in this case. So counter is equal to counter reducer. Let's just add this comma here, separate them. And then within the counter component, we're going to use this counter store to manage or maintain the state through that store. So let's go back to the counter component. And then here we are going to create our count variable. So it's going to be count of type observable. So observable comes from the or RxJS, sorry. So it's of type observable of number. So by default there is no value. So there's no initializer, so I'm just going to say that it has to be initialized. Then we're going to have the store injected to our constructor. So let's go to the constructor. Then we have store. So it's private store. That is our store. Comes from NgRx library. And then we have the different functions for the buttons or different actions. So we have the increment action, and that is going to use the store to trigger an action. So dispatch increment, which comes from the actions. Then we're going to have the decrement that does the same thing. Then we have the reset. So decrement. So that will trigger the decrement action that comes from the actions. Then we have the reset. That will trigger the reset action that comes from the action file. So that's it. Our component is finished. And as you can see, it's very, very clean. Now we are going to show this counter within our component, HTML content, and then we're going to add the actions to, or bind the actions to the buttons. Counter or count equal to, and then we have to introduce the async pipe. And since it's standalone component, we have to import the common module here. So common module, just to be able to use this async within a standalone component. So that's it. Now let's bound the actions. Click, increment, then decrement here. Click, decrement. Use a function, and then reset. So that's it. Now let's try our application and see if the store works or the NgRx store works as expected. Just head over to the application, and then from here, now let's go back to the component TS and then initialize the counter or the default value of the counter. So this counter or count is equal to the store, and then select and dispatch the select count. So we're going to use the selector to select the count of the state, so the count from the state. So this is stored in the state, which is the counter state. Then we're going to display it using that. So now let's head over to the application to see that our state is actually maintained correctly. So now I have state, the default state, which is the initial state 0. Then when I click on increment, it increments. When I click on decrement, it decrements. And then I can always click on reset to reset it back to 0. And to see that the state is actually modified, we can use the Angular Dev Tools, that is an extension, which is an extension that you can install in Chrome. And to do that, you just go to Extension, then Manage Extensions. After that, click on Web Store or Chrome Web Store, then search for Angular Dev Tools. After that, you click on Install, Add to Chrome, Add Extension. Once you install the Angular Dev Tools extension, you can just refresh the application, then inspect and open the Angular tab from the Dev Tools. After that, you click on the increment a couple of times. Then you go to the app counter. Then you check the store to see the state. So as you can see, the counter contains the value 3 that is of the count that we have here. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for new episodes or more episodes about the Angular state management, in which we're going to explore more advanced stuff like the effects and how we can implement the effects when we have asynchronous calls to APIs or backend services. If you find this tutorial helpful, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment if you have a question. Thank you.